Arcade Heroes.
Greetings, gamers. It's Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com, and before we finish 2023, I wanted to get into something that's going to be coming in 2024 from a company called DSM Arcade. Now, DSM is the airport code for Des Moines, Iowa, and that's where they are located. I recently spoke with Dan Fessler of DSM, and I've covered his business since he started it back in 2018 with the release of Switch and Shoot, which we can watch this quick trailer here. As the trailer says, the most addicting single-player game out there. So how this one works is you push the button, and when you do, it fires and it moves your ship to either left or right. And so it's about dodging, as you can see there. The graphics are pretty simplistic. They look very much like the old ZX Spectrum from the early 80s, that sort of computer there. And so, again, this one's been out for a little while now, and back in 2020 they actually did a mini version, like a cabaret version of it, and that was only $1,000. Unfortunately, at the time I wasn't able to grab one, but I think it was a great idea to offer something that was very affordable in terms of arcade games for an industry that was pretty uncertain about what was going to be happening at the time. But that was their first game, and then they followed up with that last year with Nidhogg 2. Now, you've probably heard of Nidhogg as well as 2, as it's been a popular indie game for a long time now. And so, yeah, last year they released this arcade version. So if you're not familiar with it, it's a swashbuckling sword-fighting game where you run around some old timey 1800s style locations and slash and swashbuckle there against enemies that you come across, and try not to get killed yourself. Pretty simplistic controls, joystick, 2 buttons for attack and jump. I remember thinking when I first saw Nidhogg, not the sequel, that it could be adapted into being a pretty solid arcade game. And this one sells for a little bit more than Switch and Shoot, whereas you saw there the pricing was $5,000 for Switch and Shoot, where it's $6,000 for Nidhogg 2. Obviously, Nidhogg carries with it a bigger name. I mean, Switch and Shoot was available on different platforms at home, but of course, with something like an arcade cabinet and the controls, that makes it a little nicer overall. Now, it should be mentioned that there are some software updates to Nidhogg 2. So if you already own one of these cabinets or you've been looking into it, they've increased the AI difficulty so that it's a little more challenging in single player. There's a 3-minute match timer to provide players and operators with a more focused gameplay experience, and the winner stays on option, rewarding them with the winner with a free round. And I assume that this one in particular is to help make it more arcade-like. Because, as I've mentioned many times before, the problem with turning console games into arcade games is that most of the time that they are designed with a very different formula in mind, a different game mechanics at their core. Whereas when you design something for arcade first, it has to be designed for that very fast action sort of thing. You can't sit around on menus and farm items and stuff like that. It has to be more like a roller coaster ride. And now some games, because they're trying to mimic arcade games of the past, don't require a whole lot of work or changes to them, but other ones might. Now, I've not played Nidhogg or Nidhogg 2 to know exactly how many changes they might need, but it does sound like this 3-minute match timer does help keep it so that it's not this game that's going on for 30-40 minutes on one credit when you don't need a lot of skill to get it that far. Of course, personally, I do like games where they are very challenging, but with enough practice you can actually 1cc them. But of course, it still is something there. It's this balance that has to be discovered by developers as to how to do it right. Now, there also is a new Nidhogg 2 cabinet, which has improved vinyl print with more vibrant colors, and a new coin door with cutout for the bill acceptor or electronic payment, which would indicate taking card swipe. Now, one of the things that has happened with DSM Arcade is they were building them in their own facility previously, but now they are working with Fun Company. Fun Company is pretty well known. They've designed cabinets or produced cabinets out of their facilities in Wisconsin for many, many years. I believe they've done things for Raw Thrills. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they have certainly done things for just about everybody else in the industry, including Bandai Namco and Sega Amusements and many others. I think the Mario Kart arcade cabinets are currently built at Fun Company's facilities, or at least they had been for a time, to give you an idea. And so DSM Arcade is working with them, and so if you're familiar with what they've done, then you'll know what kind of quality that you'll be getting from those machines. Now, as Dan told me, the ROI on these games has been somewhere between 16 to 20 months, which is pretty good for indie games. I mean, in general, I found that indie games do take a lot longer to get a return on your investment with them. It does vary on the game. Games like joystick games do take a lot longer than something like a light gun game or a racing game. And so 16 to 20 months is, I guess, par for the course for those style of games. I've owned some in the past that were taking longer than that, and I eventually got to a point where it's like, this just isn't going to work out, so I've maybe sold them off. But some indie games that have done well for me, one that particularly comes to mind is Friction, a light gun game from many years ago. You can find videos of that on my channel. That paid itself off in, I think it was 4 months. And oftentimes it was making more money than my House of the Dead 4 Super Deluxe cabinet. But it was a light gun game, so that's what helped it. And when I purchased it, I bought it as a kit. So it wasn't very expensive. But still, for a game that didn't have any real name to it, how quickly it paid itself off, I was very happy with that. And now with House of the Gundead, that hasn't reached that yet, but it has been doing well, and it's been doing better than much better than the Sky Cursor game that I got from Griffin Aerotech. They designed Sky Cursor, and then they did the House of the Gundead, which I have, again, videos of both of those on my channel. But anyways, let's get back to DSM Arcade. So in 2024, they are going to be releasing a new game called Perfect Pour. And Dan was telling me that he was at a bar one night and it was very busy, and he was watching the bartenders go back and forth and performing their craft. And that's when it dawned on him that what they were doing could be turned into an arcade game, and in a way that was different than Midway's old Tapper. Now, when it comes to running a bar arcade, most bar arcades really want to have Tapper because it fits exactly with their theme of serving drinks to customers. Just the problem is that Tapper came out during the Great Game Crash of 1983, and so just there were a lot of locations that didn't buy it, and production numbers were greatly diminished from where they had been just a year previous. And so I can't recall exactly what the numbers might have been on Tapper, but I want to say it was only a few thousand, which is good, but back when you had companies producing, say, like 100,000 Space Invaders cabinets or 100,000 Miss Pac-Man cabinets, only a few thousand was a drastic cut, and that's one reason why many companies went out of business around that time, is just because people were not buying as many arcade cabinets, and there are various different factors for that. But anyways, 40 years later, when bar arcades have exploded out there just simply aren't enough Tappers to fulfill the demands of the market. Now, I've been pretty surprised by how arcade developers really haven't created many games to appeal directly to the bar arcade market. I mean, there have been a few. I think Killer Queen Arcade is one that's worked out there. Retro Raccoons was designed for that. Cosmotrons, in a way, was designed for that too. Pac-Man Battle Royale is definitely one that fits very well with the bar arcade, but just a lot of the other games that have come out from the major manufacturers over the years haven't been custom made for, say, the bar arcade market. But Perfect Pour It definitely is. And so if we watch this video as shown on Instagram here, maybe I can zoom out just a little bit. So you can see that it's slightly like Tapper in that you have customers showing up and they have an order here, and then you have to fill it up with the correct colors that match with which one it is, and you have to try and get it as close to the top without spilling as possible. And that gives you the perfect pour and earns you tips as you go through there. And now I don't know if this is going to have 2 players or just single player support. I would hope that it will eventually have 2, or if there was a way to even do even more, or come up with like Tapper had these tap pouring type joystick controllers. That'd be cool if they could do that too. Again, this is a very early prototype. This game is not slated to release until fall of 2024, so it's very likely that there will be changes made to it by then. That yeah, it'd be interesting to see this one in particular show up at, say, like Amusement Expo and stuff, where you might be able to find this getting out into not just bar arcades, but maybe other places that have entertainment, like some FECs that might serve alcohol in that area. They can put that in there. But yeah, that is DSM Arcade and what they're up to. Let me know if you've played any of their games or what you think about them, and what you would like to see from them, what features you might like to see in Perfect Pour here when that comes out next year. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.